At midnight, beneath a storm-soaked Manhattan tower, Caleb Whitaker found a blue-skinned alien princess trapped inside a service elevator, a glowing treaty clasp tightening around her throat. His phone displayed one command: return the crown vessel. Every empire, boardroom, and government would soon want to claim her. But the human billionaire did something no one expected. He covered the camera, stepped back, and gave her a choice. Welcome to Galactic Contact. I hope you enjoy this journey among the stars, and may your day be filled with happiness. Now, let the story begin. The storm over Manhattan came down sideways, hard enough to make the Whitaker Aerospace Tower disappear and return in broken pieces behind sheets of rain. At 12:17 a.m., Caleb Whitaker left the charity gala on the 79th floor with his bow tie undone, an untouched bourbon abandoned on a marble ledge, and a satellite failure report burning red across his phone. 3 private weather satellites had blinked out over the Atlantic for exactly 9 seconds. When they came back, each feed carried the same impossible signature: unknown biological carrier signal, source unstable, altitude unresolved. His chief of security called it a software ghost. His board would have called it an operations issue. Caleb took the service stairs. He had built Whitaker Aerospace by distrusting clean explanations that arrived before anyone got their hands dirty. His father had fixed freight elevators in Cleveland for 31 years and liked to say buildings told the truth through the places rich people never entered. Caleb still believed that more than most forecasts. The maintenance levels smelled of wet concrete, warm copper, old oil, and ozone. Fluorescent strips buzzed above pipes, trembling under storm pressure. Somewhere below, a transformer thumped in slow intervals, like a tired heart trying to keep time. Caleb moved past locked utility cages and breaker panels, his dress shoes cutting through shallow water spreading under the fire doors. His phone lost signal, regained it, then went black except for one thin, pulsing arrow pointing towards service elevator C. The elevator sat trapped between sublevel 3 and 4. Its doors had parted barely 8 inches. Blue-white light leaked through the gap in slow pulses that did not match any emergency system in the tower. Caleb stopped with one hand on the cold steel frame. Inside, someone held their breath and failed quietly. He did not call security. He did not touch the alarm panel. He crouched, loosened his cuff, and pulled the manual release with the careful pressure of a man who had watched his father do it 100 times. The doors opened another foot. A girl sat against the rear wall, soaked in an oversized gray hoodie, knees pulled close, one hand pressed against a metal band locked around her neck. At first glance, she could have been human if the light had been kinder. Then the emergency strip flickered, and kindness ran out. Her skin was pale blue beneath the rainwater. Not paint, not makeup. Living blue, crossed near the throat and temples by faint silver lines glowing under the skin like starlight caught in veins. Her face was beautiful and wrong in a way no costume could fake. High-sculpted cheekbones, ears shaped just off human symmetry, silver-violet eyes with pupils too narrow, too vertical, too aware. The collar around her throat tightened by a fraction. She winced without sound. Caleb's phone flashed once in his palm. Return the crown vessel. The words vanished before he could breathe around them. The girl saw them anyway. Terror sharpened her posture, but pride kept her spine straight, even on a wet elevator floor. Caleb looked from the collar to the smoked ceiling camera rotating above the elevator doors. He stood, removed his jacket, and draped it over the camera lens. The red recording light disappeared beneath charcoal wool. Only then did her shoulders lower by half an inch. Not trust, just the smallest space where fear had stopped being watched. Caleb crouched again, far enough away that she could see both his hands. "I'm not calling anyone," he said. The elevator cable groaned above them. The storm hammered the shaft. Her fingers dug beneath the collar, where tiny symbols crawled along the metal surface in a rhythm that matched the dead satellites. "You are Caleb Whitaker," she said, her English careful, worn at the edges. "That depends on who's asking." Her eyes moved toward the corridor behind him, then back to his face. Every powerful man in the universe had probably introduced himself as help at least once. Caleb did not blame her for keeping score. He opened the elevator toolkit mounted on the wall and reached past the bolt cutters. Her breath caught. He took the analog voltage meter instead. "I don't know what that is," he said, nodding toward the collar. So I'm not going to pretend cutting it is brave. For the first time, her gaze shifted from his hands to his eyes. The collar pulsed brighter. The lights bent toward her. Somewhere far above the tower, one of his satellites drifted 3 degrees off command. The girl leaned forward, rainwater dripping from her hood onto the steel floor. "Don't let them find me," she whispered. Caleb looked down the empty service corridor, at the covered camera, at the impossible signal climbing through his building, and then back at the girl the message had called a vessel. He set the bolt cutters aside and picked up the meter. "Then we start by not doing what they expect." Caleb clipped the analog meter's black lead to the elevator handrail and held the red probe an inch from the metal band at her throat. The needle slammed right, hard enough to tap the glass. The girl flinched, but she did not pull away. That mattered. Fear made people run. Training made them stay still while danger measured them. Caleb lowered the probe and waited for the needle to settle before moving again. "It's transmitting," he said. Her silver-violet eyes stayed on the bolt cutters he had pushed aside. "You are not cutting it." "No, why?" "Because I don't know what happens after the cut." The answer left the elevator quieter than a promise would have. The collar pulsed again, slower this time, symbols crawling beneath the metal like small thoughts looking for a way out. Caleb angled the meter toward the tower wall. The needle jumped northeast, then dropped when he shifted it away from her throat. Not the building. Not exactly. The signal was using the tower like weather used a lightning rod. "Whoever made this wanted help finding you," he said. "It is not help." "Yeah, I got that." He stood and opened the emergency panel beside the elevator doors. Behind it, relays blinked in neat red rows, tied into the corridor cameras, motion sensors, and service access logs. Caleb pulled one fiber line, then another, careful not to kill the whole tower and drag every guard in Manhattan down on them. 3 camera indicators went black. A security chime tried to wake and died inside the wall. "Local loops down," he said. For minutes before Central notices, this hallway forgot how to see. The girl stared at him. "You damage your own tower." "Temporarily. Owners do not know wires." Caleb shut the panel. "My father did." That answer worked differently on her than the jokes. Her gaze moved to his hands, then to his soaked shirt cuff, then back to his face. Not trust. Inventory. He took an emergency coat from the wall locker and laid it on the elevator floor between them. He did not toss it. He did not step inside. "Put that on if you want. The stairwell's cold, and those lights won't hide your skin for long." Her fingers tightened at the word skin. Pride lifted her chin. "You noticed?" "I've been trying not to stare." The collar brightened, and she bent forward, one hand catching the elevator wall. A faint lattice of silver light spread from beneath her temples down the side of her neck. Too alive to be circuitry, too patterned to be random. Caleb looked at the floor until the pulse passed. When she straightened, the coat had become something she could take without feeling taken. She reached for it slowly and wrapped it over the wet hoodie. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Somewhere without cameras." "That is what hunters say." Caleb nodded once. "Fair point." He reached into his pocket, removed a brass key from a small ring, and placed it on the floor between them. Old observation suite above the mechanical floors. Locks from the inside. Manual shutters. No smart feed. No corporate network. You can put a door between us and keep it there. She looked at the key like it was another kind of trap. "Why would you give me control?" Caleb kept his hands visible and his voice low. "Because if you can't tell me to leave, I'm not helping. I'm holding." Silence filled the elevator, broken only by rainwater ticking down the shaft. She picked up the key. Her fingers were long, blue, faintly ridged near the nails, with delicate webbing that appeared when she moved too fast to hide it. Caleb pretended the meter needed his attention. The dignity of not being studied was a small thing. Sometimes small things were the only ones a person could afford to believe. He backed away and opened the service exit. The stairwell beyond smelled of concrete, rust, and storm air. "Can you walk?" She pushed herself upright, the coat hanging loose around her shoulders. Her knees shook once. She made them stop. "If I must." "That's not what I asked." Her eyes sharpened. "Then ask better when we are not being found." Caleb accepted that and stepped aside, leaving the path open. She moved past him into the stairwell, one hand on the collar, the other on the wall, ready to bolt if kindness changed shape. He followed 2 steps behind, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to abandon her. Behind them, Service elevator C flickered blue inside the darkened corridor. Above them, hidden in the storm, something kept searching. Caleb closed the stairwell door quietly. Name. She did not turn around. Sarah. It sounded borrowed. He let it be borrowed. Caleb, he said. I know, she replied. Then she started climbing. The stairwell climbed through the tower's hidden spine. Concrete underfoot, steel rails cold with storm damp. Every landing marked by numbers no gala donor would ever read. Caleb stayed 2 steps behind Sarah at first, close enough to keep her from falling, far enough that she could hear distance instead of pursuit. When her hand slipped on the rail near the 28th floor, he stopped to check a pump label he had already read 100 times. He did not offer an arm. Pride was sometimes the last clean thing a hunted person still owned. She caught her breath and kept climbing. The emergency coat swallowed her shoulders, but it could not hide the faint silver pulse beneath the blue skin at her temples whenever the collar searched the storm above. You walk slowly for a man with enemies, she said. Caleb glanced down at his soaked dress shoes. I'm 41, and I left my good excuses upstairs. Her eyes narrowed. The joke did not make her relax, but it did not make her retreat either. At the 42nd floor, the collar brightened hard enough to bend the stairwell lights violet. Sarah braced one hand against the wall, jaw tight, refusing to give the pain a sound. Caleb turned toward a breaker box and let her keep the silence. Earth power grids bother you. Earth power grids are loud, she said after the pulse faded. Messy. You should hear our politics. This time her mouth almost moved. Almost was enough. They reached the old observation level through a maintenance vestibule behind the public elevators. Caleb unlocked the first door with his badge, the second with a brass keys twin, and the third with a manual wheel set into steel. No facial scan. No voice command. No polite machine pretending permission had been requested. This floor was built before the tower got smart, he said. Then it was wiser before, Sarah said. Caleb accepted that. The suite beyond waited dark and wide behind manual storm shutters, with white sheets covering furniture from a renovation nobody had finished. No camera domes watched from the corners. No smart glass listened for commands. No conference system waited to harvest a voice print. Against the far wall, behind a bolted metal panel, sat an air-gapped emergency satellite diagnostic console, old enough to need physical switches, isolated from the corporate network unless someone opened the uplink by hand. Caleb pointed to it without walking closer. That console can talk to satellites in an emergency. It doesn't talk to the building. No automatic feed. No cloud. No boardroom mirror. Sarah looked at the panel, then at him. You brought me to a room that can speak to the sky. I brought you to a room that stays quiet unless someone chooses otherwise. She mapped the space with quick, precise eyes. Exits, vents, shutters, furniture, the distance between his body and the door. Caleb placed the brass key on the nearest table and stepped back into the hallway. Door locks from your side. Shutters are manual. Bathrooms behind the west wall. I'll leave water outside in 5 minutes. If I lock you out, then I'll be in the hallway with ruined shoes and no good explanation. She stepped across the threshold, coat dripping onto the old carpet, pale blue fingers brushing the back of a covered chair. The collar dimmed slightly, as if the absence of watching things had confused it. Sarah noticed too. Her shoulders lowered by less than an inch. Why is this place empty? It stopped making money. And humans forget what does not profit them. Caleb looked at the covered furniture. More often than we admit. She picked up the key. On my world, a locked room belongs to whoever keeps the key. Caleb nodded toward her hand. Then it belongs to you. The answer landed harder than reassurance. Her fingers closed around the brass until the knuckles went pale blue. He walked backward through the doorway before gratitude could become debt. Sarah, he said. She looked up. That name real. For 1 second, something larger moved behind her eyes and pressed itself back into hiding. Real enough for tonight. Caleb did not sand the lie into confession. Then tonight's all it has to cover. He pulled the door almost shut, leaving her the last inch. She watched him through the gap. Then the lock turned from inside, and the small metal sound filled the corridor like the first honest answer the tower had given all night. Caleb did not leave the hallway right away. He walked 10 steps toward the service pantry, stopped, and listened to the old observation floor breathe through its vents. The storm pressed against the manual shutters in slow, heavy waves. Behind the sealed panel inside the suite, the air-gapped console stayed silent, an old machine with no interest in secrets until a human hand chose otherwise. The lock behind him remained turned. Good. A locked door was not a cage when the person inside owned the key. He waited long enough for that truth to settle, then moved to the pantry. The shelves held supplies a corporation kept because insurance liked boxes checked: bottled water, canned soup, protein bars, foil blankets, clean socks in sealed plastic, and a first aid kit with scissors Caleb did not plan to bring anywhere near her collar. He heated chicken broth in a dented metal cup on a coil stove older than half his board. The smell filled the little room, ordinary and almost embarrassing under the circumstances. He liked that. Ordinary things made panic work harder. His phone woke in his pocket and flashed the message again. Return the crown vessel. This time it stayed long enough to feel less like a threat and more like a claim written by someone who had never been told no. Crown. Vessel. Not girl. Not guest. Not name. Caleb turned the phone face down on the counter until the screen went dark. He carried the broth, water, socks, towel, and first aid kit back to the suite and set the tray on the carpet 3 feet from the door. I'm putting food down, he said. Then I'm stepping back. No answer came. He stepped back anyway. The silence stretched until it had edges. The lock clicked after nearly a minute. The door opened 4 inches. One silver violet eye watched him through the gap, bright with exhaustion and suspicion sharpened into habit. You waited, Sarah said. Soup takes time. That is not what I meant. I know. Her gaze dropped to the tray. What do you want? Caleb leaned against the opposite wall, far enough that she would have to invite distance closed. For you not to pass out on imported flooring. Her eye narrowed. You make jokes when afraid. Mostly when awake. The door opened another inch. The collar beneath the emergency coat gave a low blue pulse. She swallowed the pain without letting it become sound. Caleb noticed and looked at the towel instead of her throat. There's water. Sealed. Socks. Basic first aid. No sedatives. No trackers. No smart tags. You can throw all of it out if you want. You expect me to believe that? No. He reached into his pocket, removed the second brass key, and slid it across the carpet until it stopped near the crack of the door. That locks the maintenance panel from your side too. The vents don't open wide enough for a person, but fear doesn't usually care about measurements. She stared at the key as if it had spoken in a language older than his. On my world, the one who gives a key always keeps a better one. Caleb reached into his pocket again and placed his own matching key on the carpet beside the first. Then keep both. Her face shifted. Not trust. Something more dangerous to her training. Confusion without an enemy. You would lock yourself out. I've been locked out of better rooms. Why? He looked down the corridor, where rain shadows crawled over the walls. My mother worked nights at a county hospital outside Cleveland. She said the first rule was simple. Stop the bleeding before you ask who can pay. Sarah's fingers tightened around the door edge. I am not bleeding. The collar pulsed again, harder. Her shoulder touched the frame. Caleb did not move toward her. Okay. The quiet answer cut deeper than argument would have. For a moment, only the storm spoke. Then her hand reached through the gap and pulled the tray inside. The door did not close. Steam from the broth drifted between them, warm and plain. She looked at the keys on the carpet, then at Caleb. If I stay, your people will ask questions. They already are. If I leave, mine will find me. Maybe. And you stand in the hall. Caleb glanced at the covered camera down the corridor, his ruined jacket still hanging over it like a bad flag. Best place to be if someone tries the door. Sarah lowered her eyes to the tray. The room behind her remained dark, shuttered, hers. When she finally picked up the keys, she took both. Caleb pretended not to see how carefully she closed her fingers around them. Above Manhattan, the storm rolled away from the tower for one breath, and in that small pause the collar at her throat whispered a faint signal into the sky. Dawn reached the tower without clearing the storm. Gray light pressed through the shutter seams and turned the hallway outside the observation suite into a narrow strip of tired silver. Caleb stood there with cold coffee in one hand, both brass keys gone from his pocket, and the strange comfort of knowing the locked door behind him could refuse him. Inside, Sarah moved once across the old floorboards. Not pacing. Testing distance. Testing whether the room stayed hers after the night ended. His phone came alive at 6:04 a.m., 37 alerts stacked across the glass before he could blink. Security blackout flagged. Satellite anomaly escalated. Federal liaison on site. Emergency board session requested. Elaine Cross sent one message in the clean, careful language people used when panic had already been combed for legal exposure. Caleb, whatever is upstairs, do not move it before we talk. He looked at the worded until the hallway seemed colder. Then he walked down. The crisis room on the 63rd floor still smelled faintly of champagne from the fundraiser, which made the screens feel obscene. Elaine stood at the head of the glass table in a navy suit, hair pinned tight, eyes red from a night without sleep. Two board members hovered in encrypted projection. A federal liaison named Markham sat near the windows with a badge placed flat beside untouched coffee. No uniform, no raised voice. That made him more careful. Caleb entered, shut the door, and stayed standing. Elaine looked at his ruined shirt, the missing jacket, the water stains on his dress shoes. You found the source. I found a person. Markham folded his hands. Mr. Whitaker, our terminology needs discipline. Caleb looked at the badge, then at the scan glowing above the table. That's usually where decency starts losing. One board member, Vance, enlarged a tower map. A blue pulse climbed from service elevator C to the sealed observation floor. The signal disrupted private satellites, corporate security, and a federal aerospace relay. Person is not the operational category. Caleb studied the map. Then your categories are too small. Elaine kept her voice low. No one's proposing harm. You called her it before breakfast. Silence moved around the room and found everyone a chair. Markham slid a document across the table. Temporary protective custody. We stabilize the claimant, assess risk, and prevent uncontrolled contact. Does she get counsel? Markham paused for half a second. Her legal status is undefined. That's a no with paperwork. Vance opened a second file. Defense contracts, orbital platform licenses, a Mars corridor extension, lender review clauses, numbers so large they stopped feeling like money and started acting like weather. If we cooperate, Whitaker Aerospace becomes the primary Earthside technical partner. If we obstruct, classified work freezes by noon. Elaine's jaw tightened. 10,000 employees, Caleb. That landed where she meant it to. He saw mechanics in Ohio, single parents in Florida launch facilities, night shift coders in Houston, cafeteria staff, janitors, machinists, the invisible spine of the company that had put his name on glass buildings. He did not answer quickly. Quick answers were how rich men made other people pay for their conscience. He picked up the custody order and read the first page. Biological leverage did not appear. They were too smart for that. Non-citizen entity did. Transfer evaluation did. Private containment did. He set the paper back exactly where it had been. The first thing Earth does with a stranger shouldn't be deciding who gets to hold her. Markham's expression cooled. You may not have authority to refuse. Caleb nodded toward the badge on the table. Then write that down where a judge can read it. Elaine looked at him for a long second. Not agreeing. Not yet. But something in her face stopped hiding behind the spreadsheet. Caleb turned toward the door. Kill every internal feed above floor 60. No cameras, no microphones, no access pings. If anyone tries that room without her consent, they're done here. Vance gave a dry laugh. That's sentimental. Caleb opened the door. No. Sentimental is pretending profit can survive the day we start calling people inventory. Behind him, the tower skin brightened once, the blue pulse steadying from the observation floor as if Sarah had not heard the words but had felt the shape of the choice through the building's bones. Caleb stepped into the hallway with $10 billion of pressure behind him and a frightened alien woman upstairs who still had both keys. Caleb returned to the observation floor with 2 coffees, the unsigned custody order folded inside his jacket, and the feeling that his own building had become more honest after losing half its eyes. Above floor 60, the corridor stayed dark. No access chimes. No camera clicks. No polite machines asking who deserved entry. The storm pressed rain against the shutters somewhere beyond the walls, but the old suite kept its silence behind the locked door. Caleb knocked once, low on the wood. It's Caleb. The lock did not turn right away. He liked that. A person who used a lock still owned a border. When the door opened, Sarah stood barefoot on the other side in the oversized emergency coat, both brass keys in one hand and a metal letter opener in the other. Her skin looked bluer in the gray morning light, the silver lines at her temples dim but visible, her eyes too bright from not sleeping. She glanced at the coffee, then at the folded paper under his arm. Your people decided what I am. They tried. And you came to tell me the price. Caleb set one coffee on the floor between them and stepped back. I came to let you read the receipt. She did not pick up the cup. She took the custody order instead. Her fingers moved over the English slowly, but her face understood the shape of the language before every word landed. Non-citizen entity. Private containment. Transfer evaluation. Temporary protective custody. The letter opener lowered by 1 inch, not because she felt safer, but because the paper had confirmed what she already knew about rooms with official seals. Entity, she said. That is a clean word. Clean words do the dirtiest work. Caleb kept his hands visible. I didn't sign it. The answer did not soften her immediately. It made her look harder, searching for the debt hidden inside refusal. Why? Because they asked who should hold you before they asked what you wanted. She folded the order once, sharply, along a crease that had not been there before. The collar at her throat pulsed in response, a thin violet ring under the metal. She held still until it passed. Caleb looked toward the covered shutters instead of her neck. You said last night your name was Sarah. Her mouth tightened. It was enough for last night. Is it enough for this morning? Outside, rain dragged long gray lines down Manhattan. Inside, silence gathered around the 2 keys in her hand, the order on the threshold, and the air-gapped console sealed behind its manual panel. When she spoke again, the small borrowed name fell away. My name is Saraline Veer, first daughter of the Veer dynasty, lawful heir to the inner crown of Lethra. Caleb absorbed the words without stepping closer. Princess, heir, dynasty, the kind of language that made ambitious men lean in. He lifted his coffee and took one careful sip because ordinary motions gave impossible things a place to stand. The collar, a treaty clasp. Her fingers touched the metal without pulling. They call it ceremonial. It enforces course correction when the heir is deemed privately retrievable. Course correction means pain. It means obedience with nicer grammar. Caleb looked at the custody order on the floor. Earth had learned the grammar before breakfast. Saraline crossed to the shuttered window and rested her palm against the cold metal slat. My council arranged a marriage compact with a border prince. Not for peace, for signature rights. My bloodline opens defense gates, mineral routes, old fleet oaths. If I marry under their terms, their coup becomes lawful. A living stamp. Her jaw tightened. A treaty. The clasp brightened again, softer now, listening to words it disliked. Saraline drew a careful breath. It can force retrieval only while my status remains private, uncontested, and under council authority. If another recognized jurisdiction publicly disputes my transfer, the clasp must pause enforcement until review. So secrecy is part of the leash. She looked at him then. Yes. Caleb set the coffee down, untouched now. What do you need from me? Not rescue. She said it quickly, correcting the room before it could disappoint her. Not ownership. Not a human crown replacing theirs. Good. I'm bad with crowns. The joke came out quieter than usual and did not disturb the weight of the moment. Saraline studied him with silver-violet eyes that had watched too many powerful men rename possession as help. I need a witness powerful enough that they cannot buy your silence. Caleb thought of the crisis room, Elaine's tired eyes, Markham's badge, 10,000 employees, lenders waiting beyond the glass like weather. Then he looked at the 2 brass keys in her hand and the locked door that still belonged to her. Then I won't sell it, he said. No music rose. No thunder answered. Only the tower humming around them while the treaty clasp gave one slow pulse, as if something above the clouds had heard him choose. The treaty clasp woke in one slow pulse, then another, each one brighter than the last, until the old observation suite seemed to breathe around Saraline's throat. The storm pressed against the shutters. The dead cameras stayed dark. Behind the manual panel, the air-gapped console clicked once, not because it had joined the tower, but because the signal had reached through the room like weather-finding iron. Saraline gripped the edge of the table with both hands. The 2 brass keys lay beside the unsigned custody order. Her shoulders locked, but she did not touch the collar. Not this time. Caleb noticed. He also noticed the silver lattice beneath her blue skin flaring from her temples down the side of her neck. carrying the beacon through her body like a message written in pain and called diplomacy. "It's transmitting through you," he said. Saraline's jaw tightened. "Yes. Can you stop it?" "If I could, I wouldn't have crossed half the sky to hide in your elevator." That answer had no room for comfort, so Caleb did not offer any. He crossed to the sealed panel on the far wall, released the manual latch, and exposed the emergency satellite diagnostic console. Old switches, hardwired isolation. No camera, no microphone, no corporate cloud. Just a buried uplink meant for nights when the smart systems failed and someone still needed to talk to Orbit. Saraline turned her head despite the clasp's glow. "You said this room stays quiet. It does unless someone chooses otherwise. If you use it, they find me faster. They already know where to look." Caleb powered the console with a physical key and kept his body angled so she could see every step. The screen woke in green text, ugly and honest. Outside the suite, boots moved fast down the corridor. Security, federal, maybe both. Caleb did not rush. Rushing made mistakes feel like courage. He pulled the raw beacon stream from the tower's passive satellite diagnostics, then stripped out the visual echo and anything that could map Saraline's biology. No face, no blood pattern, no genetic markers. Only the coercive signal, restraint telemetry, direction of retrieval ping, and evidence that a non-Earth device was trying to force a person into private custody. Saraline watched the redaction process with narrowed eyes. "You are hiding me. I'm protecting what belongs to you and exposing them." Caleb looked at the violet pulse crawling across the screen. Secrets protect the hand holding the leash. Witnesses protect the person wearing it. The console requested routing authority. Caleb selected public aerospace emergency channels, civilian observatories, independent skywatch networks, international aviation notice, and federal diplomatic intake. A warning filled the screen. Unauthorized disclosure may trigger contract termination, federal sanction, market instability, and classified access suspension. Caleb read all of it. 10,000 employees lived somewhere behind those words. So did lenders, lawyers, Markham's badge, and board members already sharpening concern into procedure. He pressed confirm. The beacon left the room. Not a spectacle. As record. Across Manhattan, weather systems, observatories, and emergency aerospace feeds received the same clipped alert. Suspected coercive non-terrestrial tracking signal active over New York airspace. Biological identifiers redacted. Public observation requested. No private transfer authorized pending jurisdictional review. The clasp stuttered. Saraline inhaled once, sharp, then steadied herself against the table. It did not open. It did not surrender. But its lights softened at the edges, as if secrecy had been one of its power sources and Caleb had just cut that wire. The corridor door burst open without touching the suite lock. Markham stood outside with 2 agents, Elaine behind him, pale and furious in a way that had not yet chosen its target. "Shut it down," Markham said. Caleb stepped into the threshold, leaving Saraline visible but not exposed. The room hers behind him. "It's already in public channels. You have no authority to broadcast foreign contact." "I didn't broadcast her. I broadcast the device trying to take her." Markham's eyes flicked past him to Saraline. "Step away from the claimant." Saraline picked up both brass keys from the table. Her hand shook, but she held them where everyone could see. "This room is mine." Elaine looked from the keys to the unsigned custody order, then to the console routing logs. Something in her expression changed, not softly, not dramatically, but enough that she stepped beside Caleb instead of behind Markham. The hallway shifted around that choice. Markham saw it. So did Saraline. Caleb kept his voice even. "I made it harder to disappear her quietly." Above Manhattan, the storm thinned over the tower. Somewhere beyond the clouds, whoever had named Saraline retrievable now had witnesses they had not approved. And for the first time since the elevator, the princess stood in a room full of people without looking like a thing already claimed. The offer arrived 2 minutes after the beacon entered public channels. Caleb's phone had been dead since the elevator, but it woke in his hand with no carrier signal, no lock screen, and no permission from anything built on Earth. Alien script spread across the glass like frost forming from the inside, then bent into English one careful word at a time. Saraline read it from inside the room before Caleb reached the second line. Her expression did not crack. It closed. Interim accord proposal. Transfer of Crown Vessel Saraline Veer to Lawful Veer Continuity Council. In exchange, Earth Regent Caleb Whitaker shall receive priority access to propulsion archives, mineral gate licensing, and protected diplomatic standing during transition. Markham saw the heading and stepped closer. That's formal contact. Caleb angled the phone away from him. That's a sale with a prettier table. Elaine stood near the old console, still pale from what she had just helped witness, her eyes catching on the words propulsion archives. Caleb knew what she saw because he saw it too. Launch costs cut to dust. Engines that could make every competitor obsolete. Materials no lab on Earth had named yet. A seat at the first table between humanity and the stars, offered directly to him. Whitaker Aerospace would not survive the scandal. It would become the gate. He felt the weight of that future settle behind his ribs. Then he looked at Saraline. She stood with both brass keys in one hand, the treaty clasp glowing faintly at her throat. Blue face calm in the terrible way people became calm when every fear arrived exactly dressed as expected. They call you Regent, she said. That is not accidental. Caleb scrolled. The next clause opened. Upon transfer, Saraline Veer's personal objection shall be deemed politically contaminated by unauthorized Terran contact and therefore non-binding until dynastic stabilization concludes. The hallway noise thinned. Rain in the vents. Markham breathing through his nose. The air-gapped console still sending public witness packets into the sky. Caleb read the clause again. They're saying your no doesn't count because you met me. Saraline's jaw tightened. My no stopped counting before I reached Earth. The phone warmed under Caleb's thumb. A gold acceptance field brightened, ready to make him the most important human alive. Markham kept his voice low. Mr. Whitaker, Earth can't afford to mishandle first contact. This could be the only controlled path. Caleb did not answer him. He scrolled to the final line. Earth Regent acknowledges Saraline Veer as transferable sovereign vessel pending restoration of lawful custodial governance. Transferable. The word sat there clean and bright, polished enough to pass through a boardroom without leaving a stain. Caleb turned the phone so Saraline could see the full clause. Do you authorize this? Markham cut in. Her competence is disputed by the issuing authority. Caleb kept his eyes on her. I didn't ask them. Saraline stepped to the threshold. The clasp pulsed once, weak and angry. Her fingers closed around the keys until brass marked her blue skin. No, Caleb tapped decline. A second prompt appeared. Declining party acknowledges forfeiture of technological exchange, market preference, and regent standing. He tapped decline again. The screen flashed red, then black. Somewhere beneath them, billions of dollars disappeared without even the courtesy of sound. Elaine closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them when Caleb held out the phone. Mirror the offer to public record, he said. Redact the technical archives. Leave the word transferable. Markham stepped between them. You cannot publish active alien diplomatic language without federal review. Elaine looked at Saraline holding both keys inside the room that still belonged to her. Then she took the phone. Then review the public copy. Caleb turned to the emergency legal directory tied to Whitaker's international launch licenses and non-human incident protocols nobody had expected to use outside training fiction. He selected temporary protected claimant, coercive restraint device, public witness established, private transfer contested. The form asked for a name. Caleb stepped aside from the keyboard. Yours, he said. Not mine. Saraline approached slowly. For the first time, no one in the hallway spoke over her. She typed with 2 fingers, each letter deliberate. Saraline Veer. Not Sarah. Not vessel. Not transferable. The console accepted the entry and stamped it into public record. Temporary protected claimant pending international review. Public witness established. No private transfer authorized. The clasp dimmed another shade. Saraline looked at Caleb, and the fear had not vanished, but it no longer owned the room. You gave up the stars, she said. Caleb looked at the dead phone in Elaine's hand, then at her name glowing on the console. No, he said. I gave up buying them with you. By late afternoon, the word transferable had traveled farther than the beacon ever could. It moved through public aerospace channels, federal intake logs, civilian observatories, international emergency courts, and the phones of people who had never looked up from lunch long enough to wonder who owned the sky. Whitaker Aerospace lost 2 defense contracts before the market closed. 3 lenders triggered review clauses. The board filed an emergency removal petition with the tidy cruelty of men who preferred betrayal in calendar invites. Caleb read the first line, then put the phone face down on the table. Caroline sat at the air-gapped console with both brass keys beside her left hand and the treaty clasp still glowing faintly at her throat. On the screen, her name held steady in plain English. Temporary protected claimant pending international review. Public witness established. No private transfer authorized. Not safe. Not finished. But named. The clasp pulsed once, softer than before, and a line of alien text opened across the console from the raw signal Caleb had exposed. Elaine translated it through the public copy, her voice low. Private retrieval authority suspended under contested jurisdiction. Markham stood near the threshold with his radio lowered. Suspended doesn't mean terminated. Caroline looked at him. It means it cannot command me while others can hear. The clasp clicked. Everyone stopped moving. Not because it was loud, because it was final enough to make silence stand up. The metal band loosened by a fraction, then another, its symbols dimming as the private order that had powered it collapsed under public dispute. It had not been hacked. It had not been broken. It had lost the legal shadow it needed to pretend obedience was ceremony. Caroline lifted both hands slowly and removed it from her throat. A pale mark remained against her blue skin, not wounded, not clean, just real. She set the clasp beside the console confirmation. Object beside name. Claim beside choice. Markham exhaled through his nose. The review board will request a secure facility. Caleb did not answer for her. Caroline rose from the chair, still in the gray emergency coat, her silver-violet eyes tired but clear. They may request. Procedure matters, Markham said. So does the door, she replied. She picked up both brass keys. Procedure can wait outside it. Elaine looked down to hide whatever crossed her face. Markham did not argue. That was new, and everyone felt the shape of it. Near evening, after the first international hearing confirmed her temporary status and ordered no private transfer until review, the storm broke over Manhattan. Caleb had been removed from one committee, suspended from another, and warned by 5 different lawyers not to speak to anyone with a camera. He ignored the cameras and took the service stairs to the rooftop deck. Caroline came with him by choice. Not escorted. Not hidden. The city below shone wet and loud. Yellow taxis dragging light through black streets. Steam rising from grates. Office windows flickering awake one floor at a time. Somewhere above the clouds, Whitaker satellites carried her name through public channels instead of tracking her like property. She stood at the rail, blue skin cool in the clearing air, alien features unmasked beneath the first thin stars. Without the clasp, the silver lines at her temples glowed softer, like dawn trapped under ice. Caleb stopped beside her, not in front, not behind. His tie hung loose. His company was bleeding money downstairs. His phone buzzed again. He checked it once and put it away. Bad, she asked. Expensive. I cost you much. He looked over the city, at delivery trucks, night nurses, maintenance crews, people keeping the world alive without getting their names on buildings. You didn't cost me anything I should have wanted to keep. Caroline's fingers closed around the brass keys. On Lethera, men would ask for a throne after what you did. On Earth, men ask for worse things and call them partnerships. She studied him for a long moment. And you? Caleb rested his hands on the cold rail. Keep the room. Keep the keys. Keep saying no until it sounds normal. Wind moved through her dark blue hair. For the first time since the service elevator, she looked at the sky without measuring escape routes through it. Humans live such little lives, she said. Why spend them protecting strangers? Caleb watched the clouds tear open above the city. Maybe little time makes ownership look stupid. She did not thank him. Words would have made the moment smaller. Instead, Caroline stepped closer to the rail and stood beside him, shoulder almost touching his sleeve, facing the open sky as her own witness. Caleb stayed quiet. He had not bought her freedom. He had not crowned himself with her crisis. He had only held the door long enough for her to walk through it. And in a universe where everyone had tried to claim the alien princess, the human billionaire became the first person who let her choose her own sky. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Galactic Contact for more powerful stories among the stars. May your day be peaceful, bright, and filled with wonder.